Have you ever felt like no matter how hard you try, confidence just seems like it's right out of reach? Like there's an invisible weight holding you back, but you can't quite figure it out. It might be connected to something you've never considered, a past trauma. In this video, we'll explore how trauma quietly erodes your self-trust, how it shows up in ways you might not have realized, and most importantly, how you can begin to rebuild your confidence starting today. You might not realize it, but trauma dramatically affects your confidence. And let's look at 6 ways how this happens so that you're more aware of what's going on. The first way is there is trauma that happens. So trauma occurs, and it could be abuse, it could be betrayal, but it's some type of trauma that occurs. And what's critical is that the feeling of safety that you had, security, all that, it just kind of dissipates and goes away. And now you're just left with shock, kind of the shock and awe in the worst way. And you go into a survival mode because you were before feeling very confident, safe, secure, but now you're just trying to get through this terrible event. And the critical thing that happens is you lose self-trust. And I can't stress how important this is, because when you stop trusting yourself, all kinds of cascading things starts happening to you. And right here, usually when someone has a traumatic event, their trust in themselves is lower. So we're going to look at how to fix that later on. But right now, just know that when this happens, your trust goes down. And it also undermines your confidence, because now you're not sure, like, do I have the ability to solve this? Do I have the ability to figure this out? And it challenges your very belief in, can I make good decisions? So that's what's happening when you have a trauma. And the thoughts that come into your head are things like this. How could this happen? What did I do wrong? So it's all about you. The focus is on you, mistakes you made, things you did wrong. And it's really not that healthy. But when we have trauma, usually that's what happens is we go inward shortly after that. So you have the shock, you have numbness, and then denial starts coming in, because deep down you have these feelings of self-doubt that start creeping up. And so what you do is you try to deny that and suppress that and push that down, that self-doubt down. Now that has other repercussions, but that's usually what happens when someone is at stage 1 and they face trauma. Stage 2 is emotional turmoil. As you're processing this trauma, unprocessed feelings like guilt, shame, and maybe even anger start emerging and boiling up. And often it turns into self-blame, because you're feeling like, I could have prevented this, I could have stopped it. Thoughts such as, I should have known better, it's my fault. Here you're confused and you start feeling powerlessness. Thoughts that go along with this are, why didn't I see the signs? I must have done something to deserve this. This part of the trauma cycle is very emotional, and you're having this inner conflict because you're like, oh, this was terrible what happened, but then you also start blaming yourself, beating yourself up, and you feel a lot of frustration externally with what happened, but then also frustration with yourself and why didn't I handle this better. The third is questioning your self-worth. And here you start adopting negative self-beliefs about yourself. You start having this common phrase that we hear all over the place, and you probably have heard it to yourself, of I'm not good enough. And did you really realize that trauma could be the root of why you don't feel good enough? Because some traumatic experience happened, and then the outcome of that, the result is you not feeling good enough. And then the other thing that can happen is, I don't trust my instincts. Because what you're saying is, this happened, I could have foresaw that, I could have predicted what would have happened, and then I could have avoided it. So you start blaming yourself at this part. And you don't want to repeat the trauma, So you want to avoid these types of situations at all costs. So if there's something that comes up, it's just like, oh, I'm busy, I can't do it, because you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you potentially could repeat that trauma. You start to see yourself as less as a person. Your self-worth goes down at this stage. Thoughts you might have at this stage are, maybe I'm just bad at this. I can't trust myself to make good choices. You start feeling more inadequate and you disconnect from yourself because you see who you were as painful. So you start disconnecting from that because that didn't serve you in your mind as you're thinking through this. And if I could disconnect, then I can disconnect from the pain. But the downside of that is you're disconnecting from your authentic self, your true self. And although it might give you temporary relief, long term, this has devastating consequences. Number 4 is avoidance and self-sabotage. Here, you want to avoid responsibilities. You want to avoid making decisions because that just feels uncomfortable to you. And you develop coping techniques, but these coping techniques, again, they might help you temporarily in the moment, but long term, they don't help you. So some coping techniques that you develop are procrastination. You put things off, you delay things. Perfectionism. Oh, it just has to be just right. Oh, I just need a little more time to study. All those types of things. Or you develop dependency on others. Well, I'll do it if someone else goes with me. Or I need your help. This type of thing. And it's not just here and there. It's like you start developing dependency on another person at this stage. These behaviors reinforce the belief that you're not good enough, you're incapable, and you're untrustworthy. Common thoughts you have are, I'll mess this up anyway. I need someone else to tell me what to do. So here you're having a strong sense of feeling helplessness, and you feel that you need others to help you get through the day and to get by. Without the other people helping you, it could be one significant person helping you a lot or several people helping you in small ways, but you are really getting dependent on others, not in a healthy way, but in a way that is avoiding your responsibilities and avoiding your growth. The 5th stage is internalized doubt. The cumulative effect of shame, self-doubt, and self-sabotage is that you start losing your trust with yourself to an even greater extent. You feel disconnected from your intuition, judgment, and abilities. You second-guess yourself about making important decisions, and you're always questioning, like, am I doing the right thing? Am I making the right choice? Oh, do I need someone else to externally validate me or prove that I am making the right choice? And now you're really lacking self-confidence and you feel totally dependent on others. In the previous stages, you started leaning on other people. And the 5th stage here, you're totally dependent on them. And you might even say things like, I don't know what I'm doing. I always make the wrong choice. At this stage, you're feeling very insecure. You've really taken a huge hit on your confidence, and you don't trust yourself right now. That's why you're looking for others to help you. The 6th stage is reinforcement. Now you have this pattern widely established. You've done this a lot. You've leaned on others. You don't believe in yourself anymore. You don't trust yourself. Your confidence has gone down. And now it's just a matter of reinforcing that. We are always reinforcing something. And is it something that is serving us or something that is limiting us? So positive things that are self-reinforcing are believing in yourself, confidence, doing a workout and knowing you did it, and then doing it the next day and the next day. You get that belief that, oh, I'm probably going to do it tomorrow, right? You have confidence in that. Here, you're reinforcing the things that you don't want. So you're reinforcing your ability not to trust yourself, not to believe in yourself, not to have confidence in yourself. And then when you have experiences, those things just reinforce that. So it's the whole self-fulfilling prophecy here. And over time, this just becomes so entrenched, it just becomes who I am, or this is just the way I am. But if you go back far enough, it's like, were you always that way? Were you always shy? Were you always like, did you lack assertiveness or confidence? Or were there things that caused you to shrink, to be less, and then just start believing this is who I am. This is who I am, instead of realizing who you really were. So here you're reinforcing it, and it becomes part of your identity. You just believe this is who I am. This is how I act. This is how I behave. This is what I think. Common thoughts at this point are, I'll never be good enough. So notice how entrenched that is. I'll never be good enough. And this is just who I am. At this stage, you're resigned to being hopeless. You just feel like there's just no way that this is going to change. This is just who I am. Some people are lucky. Some people get the breaks. But in this case, not me. And I'm just resigned to this life of hopelessness. What causes all this? Where did all this come from? Well, I'm going to go through a bunch of things here, 10 exactly. There's more than this, but I don't want this to turn into a 4-hour video. So I'm just going to go through briefly some of the things that cause this trauma. The first one is, no surprise here, childhood trauma. Things that happen there could be abuse, neglect, abandonment, witnessing violence. And what happens is you get some scars there, and you develop a difficulty to trust people, to believe what's really going on. I don't think any of us would be surprised by this one right here, childhood trauma. We all have heard about that. Many of us have experienced it. And so that right there is no surprise. The next one, number 2, is bullying. This can be verbal or physical, cyberbullying. And what that does is it creates a feeling of being anxious. Like, what's going to happen next? Where's this surprise going to happen that's negative towards me? And it also creates a feeling of being judged. You're never going to belong. You're never going to fit in. You're never going to find your tribe if you're always feeling judged and criticized and you're not good enough. And that's what bullying does. It causes you to feel anxious because you're not really fitting in anywhere. The third one is relationships. And when I did some research for this, I was quite frankly shocked at the statistics. 30% of women in intimate relationships worldwide have experienced some type of physical, sexual, or violent abuse, some type of abuse. And that just shocked me. That's basically about 1 out of 3 women worldwide. And then I thought, well, it couldn't be as bad as that in the United States. And I was shocked it was even worse. It's like 41% of women in the United States have experienced some form of stalking, physical abuse, sexual abuse, something like this. And I was just like, 41%? Holy moly. Now, what that does is it starts you questioning, am I lovable? Am I worth self-love? Am I worth love? And that really starts like affecting you at a deep level. So I knew that there was trauma. I knew that there was abuse, but I did not realize the extent of this until I looked into it. And I was quite shocked. And knowing how it does impact you, because if you don't feel like you are worthy of love, you're capable of being loved, you're good enough to be loved, that is a heavy burden, and that's definitely going to impact your confidence. The fourth area was academics, and there's a lot on that, but it's basically some type of public humiliation. And it could be by your peers, by school staff, but some ways you feel humiliated, like you're not good enough, you're being put down for your reading, or you're just awkward and uncoordinated. And it leads to feeling inadequate. So what happens is you get that inadequate feeling imprinted on you, okay? And then you kind of start feeling, oh, I'm inadequate. And the outcome of that is you want to avoid criticism or spots where you could be potentially a failure. So we know a lot of the things here, but common things that we don't think about are you're lazy. Now, in another video, I went through how many times people are told negative things about themselves. And you might think like lazy isn't that big of a thing. But if I tell you over and over and over you're lazy, at some point, even if you're not lazy, you're going to identify with that. So you might have had a few days where you're lazy, but then if that becomes a pattern, then it becomes a belief and an identity. So that was substantial there. And the bottom line is, in the academics, people felt shamed and then they ostracized themselves. And the being ostracized, one was by the group, but then the other one was they felt like they didn't belong, they didn't fit in, so they just kind of left. They either dropped out of school or things like that because they didn't feel like they belonged there anymore in that academic setting. The fifth one is workplace trauma. And again, this is where you don't feel like you're fitting in and you're not conforming. I can tell you, like, when I worked in the prison, there was a very established culture. And when I worked there, I was a GED teacher. And some of the guards and stuff, not all, but some of them, if they saw me actually trying to help the inmates, they would say, oh, you're just an inmate lover, or you're just, these kind of things. And it's derogatory terms because in their mind, someone in prison should be punished while they're in prison. In my mind, it was like, okay, your imprisonment is the loss of freedom, but while you're in there, you might as well rehabilitate, you might as well learn some new skills. And in the case with me, you might as well get your GED. But I can tell you, like, the culture, just those kind of thoughts of, oh, you're an inmate lover because you're trying to help inmates get their GED, what it does is it shows that you're not fitting in, you're kind of getting pushed and steered to maybe not care, maybe not give as much as you could because, they're just bad guys or this type of a thing. The next one is traumatic failure. That's number 6, traumatic failure. And here it could be your business fails, you go bankrupt, a relationship ends, like a divorce, you drop out of school or college. And the part about this traumatic failure is it's often public. It's not something you can hide or avoid. Like, people are going to know if you got divorced or not. People are going to know if your business went out or not because you're not running that anymore. So it's very public and seen, and that can have a feeling of being more deep, more intense, like more connected to your identity. The 7th one is being kicked out of the family. And this might be a family split, it might be a divorce, or it might be just people are going this direction and they don't see you and they just kind of ostracize you, like we talked about with schools and stuff. But the key here is that it leaves you feeling insecure, not knowing what's going on, and where do I belong? I don't know about you, but if you have ever felt like you're kicked out of a family, it is kind of a shakiness in your equilibrium of like, well, where do I fit in? Where do I belong? What's going on? Is it something I did? All that kind of stuff starts kicking in there where you start doubting yourself and wondering, well, maybe I should have just compromised, or maybe I should have done this, and sometimes it has nothing to do with you. The 8th one is health. So this could be an illness, a disability. And the problem here is you start not trusting your body. Now, we always think about not trusting ourselves, but, we're mind, body, spirit. So if you can't trust your body, because I've known people who fall a lot and they are breaking bones and they just can't trust their body anymore. And you feel helpless in this point. And if you can't trust your body, there's a sense of you of, man, I'm not good enough. What's going on? I used to be better. And it can really be traumatic if you're used to a healthy body and now you're having illness, disease, or some other kind of complication. The 9th one is financial trauma. This could be bankruptcy, you lose your job, or it could be also growing up in poverty. There's been lots of studies on the effects of poverty as you grow up, and you can develop shame. You can also develop feeling inadequacy, and you can avoid taking risks. Now you would think, like, what does poverty have to do with taking risks? But there's this thing that I heard one time from Jack Canfield in a course I took with him, and he talked about the poker chip effect. And there, if I have a whole bunch of poker chips, okay, let's say I'm wealthy or I've got good health or all these other things I have, I can bet poker chips, and if I have like 1,000 poker chips and I bet 10 and I lose them, it's like no big deal, right? But if I only have 25 total poker chips and I bet 10, and if I lose them, it's not half, but it's getting pretty close. So the thought there is that this scarcity mindset, being grown up in a poverty environment, it creates a scarcity mindset, and you feel like you have fewer poker chips, so you want to take less risks than if you feel you have a lot of poker chips. Then when you invest in 100 or 10 or whatever it might be, it doesn't seem like it's over the top. Because if you only had 25 and someone else is investing 100, you're like, man, I'm not going to borrow 75 because I don't know how to pay that back, this type of thing. So that is on financial trauma. The last one, 10, is loss of a loved one. Now, here, hopefully you haven't experienced that, but if you have, you know how painful that is. And it can really just shake your foundation. And you can feel ungrounded. And sometimes you can struggle to find meaning, struggle to find purpose. You can wonder, why did this happen to this person? What's going on? And remember, trauma doesn't define your worth, but it can cloud your ability to see your value. And these 10 that I went over are not an exclusive, it's not a thorough list here, but it does show you how widespread trauma is, because most all of us have experienced some level of trauma, some of us more than others, and we probably didn't equate trauma with confidence. Okay, it doesn't seem like, that's something that would fit, okay? But hopefully you're starting to see that the trauma that you've experienced definitely does impact your confidence in ways that maybe you didn't realize. So the next thing is, how do we break the cycle? The first thing is awareness. You have to be aware that trauma, even if it's like 50 years ago, trauma is still potentially impacting you. Now, I know you might say, well, that happened so long ago. It happened when I was in my 20s, or when I was a little kid, or happened, 3 jobs ago, or who knows what. But I want you to think about this. There's all these strands in your life, and you're bringing all this stuff forward with you. Okay, you're bringing all this forward with you. And you might not realize what you're bringing with you. But if I'm bringing self-doubt, if I'm bringing defeatism, if I'm bringing failure, if I'm bringing all this kind of stuff with me, I'm bringing the past into the present. And awareness is so critical, because now you are able to consciously decide, okay, what do I want to bring into the future? Because there's a lot of things in your past, and you get to choose what you bring forward. In memory research, they've found that every time you think about a memory, you are actually recreating it and rebuilding it. So the more you think about a memory, the more you rebuild it, and it's less the original. So it's not like a copy of the original. It's a revision, a revision, a revision, a revision. So if you are thinking about something that was traumatic, or you avoided it, or you pushed it down, or whatever it might be, that's still coming with you, because you're taking that energy, those thoughts, those beliefs with you. Now, you do not have to keep it that way, but the first thing is awareness. Just be aware of what is potentially some trauma I've had in the past that I haven't dealt with, that I'm just kind of unintentionally carrying it forward with me. An example many people have shared with me is something along this lines. I was told to be quiet or to shut up because no one wants to hear what I have to say. So let's say that was told to you when you were younger. Then later on, you could be in a meeting, you could be in any kind of situation, and you might not even realize, I want to say something, but that old thing is still kind of in there holding you back, feeling that, I I better just be quiet because no one wants to hear what I have to say. So just be aware that there are things driving your behavior, and if you're not acting in a way that you really want to, it could be trauma or some aspect from your past that you're bringing forward that's holding you back. So that's the first thing, is awareness. The second one, to break the cycle, is to set small, achievable goals. If you struggle speaking, then in a staff meeting, decide, okay, once a week, I'm going to speak up and say something. And it doesn't have to be something major. It could just be a small thing, but you make a commitment to yourself that I'm going to get over my fear of speaking out. And so once a week, I'm going to do that. Now, I'll tell you that there's research that shows if you are 100% doing something, let's say I exercise every day of the week, and I just get up and I take a walk every day. When I wake up, I don't have to think about, is this the day I walk or not walk? But if I tell myself I'm going to do that like 90% of the time, then it leaves a little wiggle room, a little gray room for, am I going to do it today or not? Is this going to be one of those days? And then it could roll into multiple days not doing that. So with the idea here of speaking up, just consider, if you want to be a little bit more bold, of having a daily thing where each day I'm going to speak up in a small way where I hadn't been doing that before, if that is an issue for you. If that's not an issue for you, pick something else that is an issue and just say, how can I do that daily in a really small, minute way, but in a way that I know, hey, I'm doing that, I'm building that consistency, and I'm aware of, man, I want to speak up a little bit more, and you know what? I did it today. I did it yesterday. I'm gonna do it tomorrow. The third one is, what has gone right? It is so easy for us to focus on what's wrong, how we messed up, all of our mistakes, all that kind of stuff. But here, look at what have you done right. And I know when I talk to people, they'll be like, I haven't done anything right. Well, take something big like getting ready for work. And if you say, I'm still not doing that good, well, break it down into smaller parts. Break it down into smaller parts. Do you get breakfast made every day? Well, sometimes no, sometimes no. Okay, well, do you brush your teeth every day? Yeah, okay, I do. Okay, so there. Build it to the smallest part that you do, and then build out from there. So once you realize, oh, I'm doing that every day, then you can expand out and get more and more and more if you choose to. Or you can just build on brushing your teeth. Because I do not believe you can build your confidence on failure. You can learn from failure, but to truly be confident, I think you need to build on confidence. You need to build on success. And here, you've got to really look at what's right, what am I doing right, and then build on that. And even if it's like you can't think of anything, ask other people. Say, hey, what's a few things I do right? And people will tell you, say, hey, I'm trying to help myself here. I'm trying to work on this project. And people will give you things that you'll do right. Like you might not even realize like how kind you are to people, or how helpful you are, or courteous. I mean, there's things that are going to happen that you might not realize. Someone might say, oh, you're a great speller, and whenever I get stuck, you help me. There's going to be things that you don't realize. But if you focus on what's wrong, if you focus on the mistakes, if you focus on your inadequacies, you're going to see more of that. Because whatever you focus on expands. All the other people talk about that, and I found that totally to be true. Okay, number 4, reframe your critical thoughts. One of the coolest techniques I've learned is reframing. There's books on reframing, and Tony Robbins goes into this, and other people. Reframing is such a powerful skill because you're taking something that's negative, like criticism, and you're turning it into kindness. So you're taking something and transforming it or transmuting it into one energy or one type of thought into another. Because can you get sick enough to get healthy? Can you just get sicker and sicker and sicker and sicker to get healthy? Can you get poor enough to get rich? Can you get poorer and poorer and poorer and poorer and poorer to get rich? Can you get colder and colder and colder to get warm? or to get hot. No, we all understand this. This is like, you're probably asking me like, man, what are you talking about here? But for some reason, we feel that we need to beat ourselves up to improve ourselves. We need to be hard on ourselves to get better. We need to be critical of ourselves to get better. And if you can reframe this and take the criticism, the negativity, and switch it to kindness, helpfulness, it's going to be a total game changer on everything you do. And I got a couple examples here. The first one is, they don't like me. So if you put the thought in your head, or you hear the thought, or the thought comes and you collect it, oh, they don't like me, think about reframing it to this way. When I find my tribe, liking me won't be an issue. Because what I found is, if people don't like you and they want you to change to fit into them, then you're never really quite getting it, right? But if people like you for you, then that's your tribe. Now, it doesn't mean you're not going to grow and improve and get better and better and all that kind of stuff. But at the core, they need to like who you are. And that's a good reframe there. So the negative one is, they don't like me. The reframe is, when I find my tribe, liking me won't be an issue. Okay, the next one is, criticism makes me feel like crap. Okay, so criticism makes me feel like crap. You might think that someone's criticizing me, I'm feeling terrible, right? But you could reframe that to, feedback helps me grow and I see the good in it. Feedback helps me grow and I see the good in it. Another negative thought you might have is, I don't know if I can handle this. You can reframe that into, I believe in my ability to figure this out. I believe in my ability to figure this out, and that may include the help of others. I'm not saying you have to be a one man or one woman show on this, but if you believe in your ability to figure this out, it might be like, who do I ask for help from? Or who do I get some answers from? Or who do I ask some questions for? That type of thing. But it's believing in your ability to figure it out. Now, these are the steps you can take to help yourself break out of this if you've had trauma in the past and you didn't even realize it was impacting you. Number one is, be aware of it. Be aware, like, okay, think about, what in the past am I bringing forward? What in me right now is causing me to feel uneasy, to feel doubtful? Is there something in the past that is bringing that up? That's awareness, number one. And then number two, when you're aware of that, then set small, achievable goals. So you might say, okay, I realize in the past this is really bothering me, or I feel inadequate or whatever. Okay, what could I do that would be a small goal that I could do daily or weekly, consistently, to kind of break that pattern? And number three, what has gone right? So focus on the good, focus on what is working well, even if you have to break it down to the smallest element. Number four, reframe. That's just what I went over there. And reframing is super, super helpful to you. Trauma can shake your confidence, but it doesn't have to define your future. A big key to learning is to increase how much you trust yourself. Your past only has the power you decide to give it. You decide the meaning. You decide if you want to reframe it or not. Everyone faces trauma at different levels. Do you want to give it control over your life, or do you want to put the control back in your own hands? It might be messy. You might need the help of someone like me, but know you're worth it. The only thing between you and your dreams is confidence. Start building it today.